My first career as a local news reporter, then I was in sales and advertising, and then I was in sponsorship. And in all of those roles, I found that yes, statistics matter, but people cared about the stories even more.
Don't motivate change or drive a decision. It's the how do I feel? What emotion do I have? How can I act based upon that emotion? Just focus on the person, you're gonna get way farther.
This isn't just about a project, it's about the people on the project, which will make the project even feel more meaningful. So in anything that we do, sharing stories and allowing ourselves to be seen in other stories is the most powerful way to create connection.
Where do you find this either hesitancy of people to tell their story? Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with your host, me, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I'm joined by Morgan Marie. She is a storytelling coach, consultant, and radio personality. I'm excited to speak with her and learn how those fit together, but also the magic of storytelling, which I'm a huge fan, but learning her perspective, why it's become such a facet of her life. Morgan, thanks for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Tyler. And hello, everyone.
Yeah. So let's kind of start there. You have these different careers. How do they tie together? And give us a little context there.
Yeah, storytelling is the answer. It's the thread through it all. I fell in love with storytelling at a very young age. I mean, most of us did, right? We grew up on stories, but really I was about 18 when I finally met someone who introduced me to storytelling in a professional setting as well, where it changed everything for me. And since then, my entire career has had the thread of storytelling throughout it. So my first career was I was a local news reporter, then I was in sales and advertising, and then I was in sponsorship. And in all of those roles, I found that people, yes, statistics matter, but people cared about the stories even more. And so when I would put aside the stats and just talk about the story, it sold whatever it was I was trying to sell, convince, share. And persuasion is at the centerpiece of all business activity. And I just believe that storytelling does that for us. And I'm a smarter, not harder kind of gal. And so I let the story do the hard work. It makes us 22 times more memorable. And so in every role I've had, that's been what I've held on to, and it's gotten stronger and more refined, and I learn something new about it every day. But I have been studying storytelling for 13 years, and so that's the through line for sure. And I find any and every way to get storytelling involved in my life, personally and professionally.
One of our speakers at my event last year, the Impact-Driven Leaders Summit, Katie Casada, storytelling coach as well. And one of the things learning from her is, one, we can't have enough people that help others craft their stories, tell their stories, understand the value of stories. And so with that kind of impetus, and where do you find kind of this either hesitancy of people to tell their story?
So many places, but the first that comes up for me is that humans at our deepest desire, we want to be heard, seen, and known. But then when it comes to being seen, we get scared. Because what do we want to be seen and known for? And so we worry about what story to tell, how to tell it, how much do I tell, what details do I leave out, which ones do I add? And we can get so wrapped up in ultimately our insecurity of that and fear of how it comes off. And I think that's where people just we all understand at this point, at least I believe most of us understand that storytelling is important. And we know that it creates connection in that way. But connecting it to your personal life, and then how much of your personal life do you leave out in your professional life, right? There's a lot of, I think, lines in different industries have different answers, and different CEOs have different answers for how they want that to come to life in their businesses. But I think that probably is where they get caught up, right? Is in the insecurity of like, oh, I do want to be seen, because that's where connection happens. But then I'm kind of scared to be seen at the same time.
You know, it's a dynamic as you share that, and me thinking about kind of me at 45. And there's so much of my early profession, early 20s was like, don't bring your personal to work. It was kind of like your personal life, leave that there. This is work. You know, you come to work. It's almost like the show Severance. You know, it's kind of like, if you've watched it, I've watched Mississippi. It's hard to get into. But anyways, it's this idea of you're different inside and out. And I think when it comes to this has been my experience. I want to kind of you take it and give it more is people feel like my story's not important, or I've told myself this story in so many ways and so many times, I'm sick of hearing it. And so therefore no one else wants to hear it, even though they've never heard it.
Yes, yes, and yes, right? Both of those, I think those are additional reasons that people hold themselves back from sharing the stories. I'm particularly interested in when you said people think that their lives are boring or that they don't have a story to share. I find that a lot of my clients say that to me, and they come to me with, what story do I share? Or we compare traumas to each other and say that yours is, what you went through. Why would I ever share what I went through? But I will argue that time and time again that your people need to hear what you have to say. So your people aren't my people, right? We might have a crossover, but if I assume that I've already said it or said it enough, like, one, that's likely just a story we're telling ourselves, right? We could spend an entire episode on the fact that, like, we live the stories we believe. So if we believe a certain story about ourselves, and humans were evidence-based, right? So if you tell that story to yourself that my story is boring, you're gonna find every bit of evidence that you can to back that story up. Or I challenge you to think, okay, my story might be boring to me, but my boring could be someone else's breakthrough.
I think that last piece is something that I've tried to gravitate to. And it took me experience and it took me personal growth and understanding. And when we talk about this idea of the power of storytelling, either as leaders or in sales, it's really coming back to that last point is my story, whatever that may be, in the collection of stories is powerful in impacting, influencing people. And it's the ability to accept that.
Mhm.
And to me, this is my wonder. You tell me wrong. You're the coach. I'm not. But I think one of the greatest things a storytelling or someone that helps craft messaging from communications marketing, the greatest thing they can do is give others the confidence, the I'm looking for a word, kind of the permission
Mhm.
to share their stories, that their stories are valuable.
For sure. For sure. And I guess whenever we say, like, share your story, I think oftentimes there's this, like, massive weight behind that, that it means that you have to share your entire life story. Or it means that you have to have something so profound having happened to you that someone else can see themselves in and create this big transformation in their life. And that may happen, right? Potentially. But I'm also interested in the day to day stories, just the stories that make Tyler Tyler. What made you get up this morning when you talk about your support of local sports?
This morning was a rough one. There was a hockey game last night, and it was double overtime, and started at 7, done at 11. Of course, we stayed to meet one of the players, and so getting home at midnight, I'm like, that's way past my bedtime, like way past. I am in bed at 8:30, even when it's sunny out. I'm in bed at 8:30, up at 5. Like that works for me, and this staying up till midnight stuff. I didn't like it when I was in college,
On
much
a
less
school
now,
night,
but
even. Come on now.
goodness gracious, the things we do to support people in our community. But the great thing about that, as you were kind of bringing those together, is sports is one of those areas that I've learned and found, no matter the political ideology, is a community binder.
Mm, mm.
And I think the other one, or with in tandem that we've recognized and I've been told, is stories.
I love that. Yeah, I would see the same thing in both of those, right? In that community aspect of, I've studied storytelling for so long. One of my theses back 10 years ago was loneliness and leadership, and how the thought of, as soon as a leader says that they have something that they want to share, and another leader says, before Me Too became Me Too, and that way they said Me Too, they felt seen and they felt connected, right? So now we have this through line for what I said earlier, right? But it's scary to be seen, and it's
Because it takes
vulnerable.
vulnerability, right? There you go. It takes vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah. But even what you said too, doubling down on when I talk about like the day-to-day stories too, like yes, it takes vulnerability to be seen and those stories matter, but also even the day-to-day stories, like when you describe what you just said about you, all you did was tell me 30 seconds that last night you went to a local hockey game with your family, stayed up late, but normally you get up early and that's important to you because X, Y, and Z, right? I could find so much in just that 30-second story about you that you didn't have to work hard to tell me. You just shared with me a moment of your life, your lived experience that I went, "Oh, that's who Tyler is."
So let's use that example. If I'm a leader, you're someone that works on my team, and I walk into office, and say we're having again a 2 o'clock in the afternoon meeting. We're remote working different places, and you're asking me about that, and I share it. What I believe just happened there is I was willing to be vulnerable enough to share this is what's going on, and you made mention all the points of connection. But it takes that vulnerability. And I've seen that in the past. I mentioned in a different world, they were like, don't let them ever see you vulnerable because that's when you're weak. I would contend that when we allow for authentic vulnerability, that's really strength because it strengthens those connections. And I believe in our today's world, that's where people want to engage and live.
And today's world in particular too is really challenging that paradigm because you're right, it is newer and it is hard and scary for people that find that is really uncomfortable for them, right? And I'm not even just talking extroverts versus introverts because that's kind of an unfair thought is to say that all extroverts then are willing to share and introverts aren't like that.
Yeah,
That's not even the
yeah, I
right
agree.
title to put on it, but I do think it's easier for some and more challenging for others. But there is just this level of like once you get past that it's not really about you. If you really want to be a strong leader, it's not really about you. It's about who you want to reach. And so then you have to flip yourself and put yourself in their shoes and think, okay, what do they need to hear me say? What would open up our communication stream? And it's likely not what's going on with the project, it's what's going on with the person.
Man, I love that. I mean, too often, coming back to what you said earlier, is people focus on facts and stats. And facts and stats, as I've learned, and don't motivate change or drive a decision. It's the how do I feel? What emotion do I have? How can I act based upon that emotion? And I think, as you point out, like, yeah, just focus on the person. You're going to get way farther. That's what I hear from you.
Right, absolutely. And I think in every aspect of business, right? I would say that that's true of sales. And I could share a number of different stories when you're in a sales pitch and you think you got to bring the big deck that supports it and sells all the stats. And then I would find myself, I just like would put that deck aside and make eye contact and ask good questions. My nickname as a kid was Curious George. And I loved that thought when I was younger, right? I would ask so many questions, probably so annoying to my parents, but now I grew up and I think that really hasn't changed. And that's what creates connection as well. People love to talk, they love to share about themselves, but you opening the door and allowing them to makes you the person that invited them into that space and created that safety for them to go, oh, okay, this isn't just again about a project. It's about the people on the project, which will make the project even feel more meaningful too. So I say sales, in networking, in interviews, in anything that we do, sharing stories and allowing ourselves to be seen in other stories is the most powerful way to create connection.
I know a big part of the group that you work with, what's passionate about, are women, female entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
What have you seen is uniquely different about people that are, female entrepreneurs, but also the challenge in telling in sharing stories?
So many things come flooding through my brain as soon as you ask that. What makes them unique is most of the women I work with have incredible hearts. Big heart-led women that their mission is so strong because their why is so deeply attached to their heart.
Do you think that's different for an entrepreneur rather than an executive?
Yes, and likely a an entrepreneur has created a mission from something they've experienced, something oftentimes entrepreneurs create something that they feel is missing.
It's more of
something
an emotional drive.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's or on their timeline, they've experienced something that they go back to knowingly or unknowingly and find connection to and then create a business from that often. But I wouldn't say that executives that could be true of executives as well because a lot of executives are mission driven too and find themselves in a role that is close to their heart from
Yeah.
something they've experienced too. So it's hard for me to say I say yes because I do think it's definitely different. Working with entrepreneurs, working executives would be very different. My 90-minute sessions look completely different depending on who I'm working with in that way. But there's still that through line, I think that women in particular, and then you asked a really good question on top of that with like other challenges I've seen in that with women. And because we have such strong hearts, we get so attached. We care so deep
My baby.
for
I
sure.
mean, I'm married to one. I get this. I understand. And so
Yeah,
as I'm asking the question, I'm thinking of my wife
yeah.
and part of the challenge my, wife as a female entrepreneur is, well, if I can do it, why can't you?
Mhm, mhm.
And, often that limits the amount of struggle and story because she's just like, I've forgotten about it. I overcame it. Whereas I think if I were to analyze her based compared to executives that I work with or talk to, is it's almost like the challenges they are up against are so much more external that it's not internal. And so it becomes this outward, problem. Whereas in my experience, and I'd love you kind of as we're discussing this two dynamically different, a lot of female entrepreneurs that it's more of an internal struggle. Am I worthy? Can I do it? Am I doing the right things? Am I being, kind of supported in this? And so I think those two dynamically different, those are completely different stories.
As anyone's are, right? No matter what role you're in. I think that too, like that it depends on your season of life that you're in. It depends in what you've experienced before. I think people that go into entrepreneurship before they've done corporate have a different experience versus people that, do it. So it's really hard to make a one size fits all. But I do think women in particular, because of our big, wonderful, incredible, powerful hearts, right? And there's always that other side of what a really strong, vivid heart can do, and it can often also kind of hold us back in those ways too.
I didn't really intend to go here, but just the thought of, you know, the female entrepreneurs that I know that are driven by heart, that are also in that I want to take other people with me because can only accomplish it if I do. Their heart is on full display all the time. That's what makes their organizations, their drive great. Whereas I think so often in so many, classic leadership roles, we just talked about this evolution in leadership to say, hey, bring more authentic vulnerability to the table and be great with that, which I think is generally a pretty classic feminine quality. And we look at a lot of corporate executive boardrooms and they're like, don't bring that here. In other words, if you want to succeed in this world, you almost have to mimic these very aggressive, masculine qualities. And it's like, no, we don't need that. That's not healthy for men to do in total, much less thinking we need now women to, mimic.
Absolutely. And I think that I'm proud to say that I think we're also as a collective generation challenging that too. Right, and making it more acceptable and okay to be our full selves in that sense. I find that it fascinating, the notion of work-life balance, because I don't know that I really believe that there is a work-life balance. I think it's all one because, like, work-life, like, it's your life, right? And so we work so hard to disconnect ourselves from our personal to our professional, and as soon as you walk in the door, right, you've gotta put that armor up and you gotta walk in and feel it differently. And I challenge that because I wonder if that's really true, right? Especially if you're in a leadership role and you feel that you have to step into this space and shut off weekend and walk in weekday, but then you're asking your staff to do the same. And then you're thinking about, but wait, I want my full staff to be their full selves here. Talk about culture in your upcoming event. I want my culture to feel like they can be their full selves. Well, that starts with leadership. And so as scary as it is to feel seen, as I talked about in the beginning, it's so powerful because if you allow yourself to be seen, you invite others to do the same.
Yeah. One of the kind of facets of some of the work that I've done, and I ask people, would you work for the person
Mm,
who's inside of you?
mm.
In other words, kind of this idea, if you speak badly to yourself, if you feel like, man, I have to do this because people are going to think X, Y, and Z of me, would you want to work for somebody that's telling you that? In most of the cases, to a negative, no. And I think coming back to this idea of storytelling and vulnerability and just there's a difference between, oh, poor me, which is just kind of like, victim dumping, as opposed to being authentic. To me, that is, sharing in a way that's going to build connection, that's going to help a relationship move forward. And I think when you bring up this idea of balance, and especially still this concept of storytelling, is allowing cohesion of life. Hey, what do I do outside? What do I do inside? Because for me, in my experience, there were many days, as I have cows out here, I have a cow there, that I wanted to hide from that because our society was saying that's shameful. That is less than. We don't need that. We don't need it. So this idea of I get separating lives because a certain portion of you people didn't accept. And all of a sudden we're in a totally different place where people like are enamored by agriculture, and myself and other people that have worked in ag and grew up on farms were like, it's kind of weird. Like we're
Mhm.
waiting for them to pull the rug out from underneath of us and just make an SNL skit and start laughing. Like that's
Yeah,
the
right.
reality. And so I can relate to the idea of someone's like, yeah, do I want to be my full self at work as an entrepreneur? Do I want to share what I'm really passionate about? Because then all of a sudden, the world and our culture that's in is we start to say, well, that's not in the moment. That's not cool. We're going to mock it instead of like, man, I'm glad they're standing up for their values.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing too is like not to really put it in such a simple fashion, but we only have one life to live. Right? So you think about the one life you want to live is one life and you're your full self and your full being, and like how fulfilling is it to feel like you don't have to hide and you don't have to shy away from and shame, because I do believe that your right people will find you. And when you just start telling more stories that are true and real and authentic and feel good to you, they'll feel good to your people. And so the work that I do too is strategic storytelling. And I use that word strategy on purpose because there is a strategy, a little bit of game of chess, right? I always encourage my clients, I want you to have a toolbox, right? 5, 6 stories in that toolbox at all times, that no matter what room you're in, you have a story to tell. But the story I'm going to tell you is so different than the story I'm going to tell my set of female entrepreneurs, is so different than the one I'm going to tell my students, right? I'm an adjunct at Gonzaga and I have been for 10, 15 years now, and each student group is different. I see that evolution changing. And so there's always opportunity to kind of like step back, I guess, right? And ask, who is it that I'm trying to reach?
Mm, totally.
And what do they really need to hear from me? And then if you've done your homework, you've got your toolbox, you're like, oh, got it. Now I've got a story I can share to back up my why. And then you're going to reach your audience even more effectively in a boardroom, in front of a presentation, on social media, you name it.
I think there's something that I really embrace is one, you have to learn who you are and be authentic to that. But more importantly, it's this idea as a recent guest of mine who shared about empathy is finding out what matters to the other person and make it matter to you. And in that moment, kind of this idea of storytelling, it's like if I have a story, but if I just go blab stories, people are like, oh, here comes Morgan the storyteller. It's like, I don't
Right.
know, I've heard them all. As opposed to relating to the connection, the situation to say, hey, how can I connect with this person? By utilizing a story of my experience and asking for them and having a conversation. I believe that's when leadership is done well and at its best, especially when a leader is able to tell the story and cast a vision of what's possible.
Absolutely, right? 10 times. I'll double down on that for sure. And my most effective leaders that I've had in my career, I think about those are the ones that have broke through that barrier rather quickly, right? Whether that was in the interview and I immediately was like, oh, yep, I want to work for them. Or it was in the first few weeks of work and we would, get to know each other on what felt like a personal level. So I felt seen in the office in that space. And then I think in the exact opposite of that, right? The leaders that I haven't necessarily had that connection with are the ones that was closed door. and by appointment only, and bring in only your best question. Don't you dare ask 3, because if you ask 3, right? And I'm like, but I have actually 5. I have a lot of questions. And leaders that want to have that dual conversation, be seen, be heard, and hear, right? Those are the really impactful leaders as well.
What do you think is the difference as you think about your experiences there?
Yeah.
What do you think is if you had to analyze what's the difference between those two? And let me, as you're thinking about that, let me rephrase in a way. Who are the ones that embraced their story and shared it, as opposed to the ones that ran from their story and hid it?
Yeah, that was going to be my answer, was someone that's healed.
Okay.
Someone that's chosen to look at themselves and be okay with the parts that they don't have all the answers, and that they'll find it collectively. I think a good leader builds more leaders, not builds more followers. And so if you want, you build the team that's stronger around you, right? You hear that often. I have a great team because I'm better for it. They're better than me. Leaders like that that really have that humble attitude, that allow themselves not to have every single answer all the time perfectly. People don't relate to perfection. That doesn't create connection. And so allowing yourself to be seen and healed in a way that recognizes that I might not have every answer, but I've got the right team that's going to help me find it. Or if we don't have it, we're going to find it together. There's that keyword togetherness, right? Makes you feel like you're with someone and not a follower, right? That feels like you have to just like abide by everything.
Here's what I take from this is these are simple principles,
Mm.
but they're often, as we see in our world today, they're not embraced because, it's either we try to make it more complicated to puff ourselves up. Look how, complicated this is. I have to be in this role. Or we get to the place of what I believe is acceptable in what my community believes is acceptable. We want to force on others to be acceptable instead of saying, hey, what values can we hold on to? And I think that's where it comes back to the storytelling. How do you see values either lived out, walked out, and storytelling kind of combining to, impact?
Well, 10 times over if their branding is done well, right? Your values should be evident in every aspect of your branding, your mission, vision, values, your statements, your taglines, your bio. Every time someone else mentions who you are and what you do, that should have an evident story behind it that's mission driven, right? That's what people connect with. And I want your story being told in rooms that you never enter into. So the better your story can be, the clearer, more concise, more real, creates that connection and allows people to tell it again, right? They can't wait to tell your story for you. Gosh, that's incredible. That's marketing at its finest.
Yeah. If somebody was to tell a story about Morgan, what would you want them to tell?
Hmm. I love that. It's a great question. I probably would lead with that her nickname was Curious George as a kid, and she continues to be curious all the time and asks questions that make other people better, stronger, help us collectively get somewhere quicker, right? I think that like all the work that I do has heart and mission behind it. And so I probably want a few funny anecdotes to be shared. Depending on our time left, I could tell you a story or two. But if you know me well in my personal life, or if you want to follow me on social, you'll see some stories for sure. I live an entertaining life in that way, and I like to share it because I think that the day to day stuff, right? Those everyday moments that just show you who Morgan is. There's such value in that. I could prepare a
So
story.
give like a little bit of a snippet of one of those.
Give a little snippet. Let's think
Yeah.
about one even. Let's do a super relevant one from recent. Let's think. Well, one of my stories that people share in rooms that I'm not in, I'll double down
Yeah,
on
there you go. Okay.
is that when I was on TV, I accidentally cussed on air.
Okay. Was this like a modern day where we don't really care about that stuff in media? It just kind of isn't this big a deal? Or was this at a time and a place like,
It was a
oh,
time and
this is a
place that it would
showstopper?
have been a big deal.
Okay. All right.
And it was that I was live at 3 a.m. outside a structure fire.
Okay.
Although when I got to the teaser, which comes up right before you get back on TV, I said I'm live at a Stryer.
That's right. Okay.
Switch structure fire to I
I
can't
mean, you
even
can
say it. I
say
don't know
it.
if I
I
can
mean,
say
it's
it.
okay. You can say it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's already been on air, you can say it.
No, no. Yeah,
Like, we don't
luckily
have
it
to
didn't.
worry about the FCC here. You can say it. It's all right.
Luckily, it didn't actually. It went too fast, and it was okay. But it was the moment of when, as soon as I said the F word, and my photographer, who was behind the camera, his eyes got brighter than the light right in front of him. I'm like, oh no,
What'd I
something.
say? Oh,
Yeah,
shit.
what happened? In that moment, you have to decide, like, who do I want to be, and how
Yeah.
do I want to come across, and what is it that I think my viewers and people need to hear from me, etc. And I think about what I hope it actually did was made me human, because I likely was in front of them daily and I had this perfect put together look, right? And you work really hard to tell the story perfectly. And then I think about actually a moment like that. I bet you I connected 10 times more with my audience than I ever had before. And so every day, that was 10, I don't even know how many years ago now when I was on TV. That was 2014 or 15, that would have been. But now I'm on the radio every day, and whenever I make a mistake, I just laugh. And I just let my listeners be human with me, and to think that if she does it, I can do it too. And so to all the leaders that feel like we have to be perfect and we have to put on this face and this mask, and that's how I'm going to be seen, is that I just challenge that a little bit of yes, you can be seen in that way, and it's really important to have this professionalism, right? Like, I worked very hard to tell stories that matter on TV, and every day on the radio now, I want you to be entertained through country music. But more than that, I want you to know that there's a human on the other side of the air that cares about you, cares about our community, and is doing this so that we all collectively rise.
One thing I believe is that's exactly what people want from those that they work for and with.
Mm.
And we have a very strange way of getting there sometimes, but I believe it's getting there. And I believe a big part of it is through telling stories, to embrace our fears and insecurities rather than trying to hide from them and build these walls around them that I had to work through. So I very much appreciate it. I know stories are a huge part of it. Where can people learn more about you, get into contact with you, any of those things, Morgan?
Easiest place is on Instagram, The Storytelling Coach. And second to that would be my website, coachmorganmarie.com. Either one of those will lead you to the right place. And I'd love to answer any questions or dive deeper into storytelling, especially if someone heard something and this resonates with you. I would love to hear from you, right? I think that's the other thing I encourage people to do is, like, we often you walk down the street and you're like, oh, I like her shirt, but we don't tell people. And I'm like, why? Why don't we tell people? So if something resonated with you and you listen to Tyler often, like, tell him what you like about his show and why you listen in that way so that he can continue to curate more of that, right? I think that we don't tell people how we feel enough. And so I really would love to hear from anyone. If something I said today spoke to you, or you feel inspired by a story, or now you want to build out your toolkit, let's do it together.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for everyone watching on YouTube. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the bell so you get notified each time we drop new content. And then one more thing. If you're listening on wherever you listen to podcasts, if you could rate and review this episode, it will help more people learn from impactful individuals like Morgan.
I second that for him, and it matters, right? The easiest way you can support local business or people that you like are leaving them a review or sharing their content, right? There's so much noise out there in the world these days that if we can just do that to help each other out, it will help the right message reach the right people even more. And I was going to say also, they can see me and meet me and come up and introduce themselves at your conference, because I will be there and I can't wait.
Awesome. So that is the Impact Driven Leader Summit, May 7th and 8th, Spokane, Washington. Go to idlsummit.com to register, get your ticket, and see us both there. Till next time, choose to lead with impact.